Greetings and salutations from my property in Flathead County, Montana, where I'm on a bit of a semi-vacation handling some things with our aviation company administratively from here, while Aaron and Dan handle the hands-on things that are going on. I come up here about once a year, and I'm so glad that I bought this very peaceful property and just enjoying my time up here in Flathead County, Montana. Recently, a lot of people have come up with the very strange idea that mental health workers, rather than police, need to be responding to many, if not most, 911 calls. And I think that the people who have been making this ridiculous proposal don't really know a lot about these people, these so-called mental health professionals. I know a young man very well who some years ago was confined to a mental institution for several days for no damn good reason. And it took those idiots several days to realize that there was nothing wrong with him and he didn't belong there at all. There was a huge dispute going on in the house where he lived, a really heated situation, and in the course of that situation he made an offhand comment that maybe I should just go away. He was a teenager at the time, and somebody hit the panic button, and as a result he ended up confined to a mental institution for several days. And he's one of the sanest people that I know. He has some issues, and being introverted is not an issue. I am an introvert myself, but a lot of people see that as some sort of defect. It is not a defect. It is simply a different way of relating to people and processing information. We tend to prefer small, close groups of friends rather than a wide network of friends. And we tend to relate to people better one-on-one and in groups, although many of us can be very good public speakers and actors and perform on the public stage. So he is an introvert as far as I know him, and there's nothing at all wrong with that. But he also has social anxiety, and that is completely understandable, especially when you look at the society that exists in the United States today. You realize that there are a lot of people that you just can't trust very far. In fact, you can't trust many people very far. If you look at United States society today, there are people who don't have any moral standards at all. And they're very common, and it's really, really hard to trust people. And on top of that, there is the situation that he grew up in. He grew up in a very rough environment, and as a result of that, developed some social anxiety, and it is extremely, completely understandable if you know anything about his background. And I know a lot about his background. He's a very fine young man, very smart young man, very good person. But for no damn good reason, he spent several days confined to a mental institution. He never belonged there. You know, he saw it as a punitive situation. He was asking, what did I do to get here? And it was because somebody hit the panic button. And while this was going on, I was raging on social media against the person who was responsible for that. But he never belonged there. And it took these idiots several days to figure that out. They were so incompetent. And of course the state produced a very big bill, and you can't tell me that that didn't have something to do with the reason that he was confined. But they were completely off the mark in this situation, these mental health professionals. And that's something that is not going to follow him. It was a teenager when it happened, and it was completely unfounded, but it took these people days to figure it out. Now, I majored in sociology in college. I studied sociology, political science as a minor, and also English as a minor. And I can't say that I trusted the sociology faculty very much either, but they had some interesting things to say about psychology, the psychology department. one of the sociology professors was telling us one day that the people in the psychology department truly hate one another. And someone made the idiotic decision to send all those people off on a retreat, and it ended up a much worse situation than it was before they went on the retreat. And corporate psychology people come up with all these stupid, idiotic things that they think are good for team building, and they're just so ridiculous. When he was telling us this, I saw the picture I had in my mind where these people were sitting around in a circle somewhere, and they were having Truth Day, and they were airing their grievances with each other, and what a stupid thing that is to do. And then they probably went through these stupid exercises of pretending that you're stranded on a desert island with this person that you can't stand, and you have to survive together and figure out how you're both going to survive. And here's another one they may have done. Have you ever heard of the trust falls? That's this really stupid, idiotic thing where you have people fall backwards and see if they can trust the person behind them to catch them, and that is something that people actually do. And that is just so completely idiotic. I'll tell you, with our firm, with our little group, if something happens to you, you don't have to worry about whether somebody's going to help you or not. You'll get help right away. You don't have to go through these silly exercises to build trust. You know, if something happens to you, you're going to get help from whoever's there. So there's no problem with that. And so they went through all this, and the situation was worse than ever when they got back. It didn't help at all. And I remember I was working for one company, a retail company one time, and they had us go through some nonsense, and they were showing this video on team building, and these people doing this video said, well, the way teams work, they have 4 stages: forming, storming, norming, and performing. And everybody was just trying quietly not to laugh their heads off. This was so funny. And they're all hung up on slogans and naming teams. And one of our teams suggested we ought to name ourselves the Hellraisers. And it was just ridiculous. And those exercises didn't help anything at all. If anything, they made the situation worse. I had a couple of psychology classes while I was in college, and I had a great psychology instructor. Her name was Ms. Ford. She had a master's degree, not a doctorate. And we did a pretty detailed survey of psychology, and one day she tells us, most people are better off simply discussing their problems with their friends and getting support from their friends. And I'm sitting there thinking, yeah, that's right. That makes perfect sense. It makes a lot more sense than going through all this therapy nonsense. And how many people I could tell you who went through so-called therapy and they came out of it messed up even worse than they were, or it didn't hold, or their lives ended in tragedy or something similar. And I'll tell you this about psychology too. Did you know that it consists of a bunch of competing theories? There are major disagreements in psychology, and the kinds of therapies that people use depend on what theory they subscribe to. Did you know that? There's a lot of disagreement in that field. And probably the best mental health professionals are psychiatrists, because they can actually prescribe prescription medicine, which is the primary and probably the best treatment for people who have some kind of organic brain disorder. But with situations like depression, normally depression has a cause. People are depressed about something usually, and the way to solve that problem is to solve the problem that is causing the depression. And that's how you solve that. Now, there are some people who have chemical imbalances and other things, and those things are best treated with medication. But I must tell you, in my years of experience, I've grown to very much distrust people who are in the mental health profession. I just really don't think those people know what they're doing, a lot of them. And the case that I mentioned at the first of this video brought that home in such a forceful way to me. These people didn't have a clue what they were doing. They committed this young man. There was no reason for him to ever be there in the first place. It took days for these idiots to figure that out. And that's who you want responding to 911 calls? I tell you, if you think situations are bad now, wait till you get these mental health professionals involved. And as for people who experience problem in their life, I agree with Ms. Ford. They're better off getting their support and help from their friends. If you have true friends, they will back you up and support you and help you. And that is normally the best way. Now, most people can't afford all this expensive therapy anyway, and the effectiveness, I think, is very questionable. So people talk about police officers not being educated. Well, there are such things as educated idiots. A political science professor of mine said one time, whereas a lot of college grads are dopes, a lot of high school grads are pretty smart. That was Dr. Ralph Savage in political science, and he was so right. I have seen that so many times where you had people with degrees and they're just airheads. They don't have a good understanding of what actually happens in real society and the real lives of people. They're just airheads. They've been indoctrinated with certain ideas that are held by people high up in academia, and they don't have a clue what goes on in the real world. People who study hard sciences are better off. They do have more of a clue what goes on in the real world, but when you get into the social sciences, it's really a dicey proposition. So I'll tell you what I think about this idea of having mental health workers respond to emergency situations and 911 calls. I think it's completely ludicrous. I think it's idiotic. I think some of these people will probably do more damage than any police officer ever did. And I think a lot of them will end up maybe hurt or killed if they go, because the fact is that a lot of crimes happen because people are just immoral and bad. And that's a fact that we don't seem to want to deal with in the United States. It's not so much that people are mentally ill, it's that they're immoral and bad a lot of times. And we want to turn our face away from that and pretend that it's all some mental illness that they can't really help. Well, that's stupid as hell. That is absolutely ridiculous. So if we end up in the United States where you have mental health professionals responding to a lot of 911 emergency situations, you're going to have a much worse situation than you have right now. I'm convinced of that. Crime will skyrocket. And some of the victims of those crimes will be mental health workers and social workers. I have no doubt about that at all. So having mental health workers respond to emergency calls, 911 calls, you better be careful what you wish for, because if you get it, it's not going to work out like you think it is. That will truly be a bad situation. I have no doubt about that. Have a very good day.